Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think I will call this 2 o'clock meeting of the Full Ways and Means Committee to order. Thank you all for being here. We do have a quorum, so we are justly organized and ready for business. Today will be another day of what we call first readers in this committee. Because of the size of it and the number of subcommittees we have, it gives everybody on the committee an opportunity to know what's going on in all the subcommittees. Because we have to parcel out the work when we have hundreds of bills to deal with. So we're going to be hearing from the authors of the bills or designees from the authors today, a general overview of the legislation, and in maybe one case or two, a brief bit of testimony from some other surrogates for the matters by special request. And so is there anybody who would like to bring anything before the committee before we begin the first reader process? Seeing none, I'd like to call on Representative Lindsay, who I know his name. If you would, Mr. Lindsay, let us know about House Bill 1230, please, sir. Are you going to sit at this one here? Where you prefer? Where? I just need to know which mic. I know you'll probably need notes given your memory in the past. What number are you? I want everybody to hear you. 12.
Yes, sir.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman O'Neill. Appreciate it. I bring before y'all House Bill 1230, which is an enabling legislation that goes along with a proposed constitutional amendment from Representative David Lucas, which is H.R. 1116, which is already in the committee's process. What this basically will do, Mr. Chairman, there's been some ambiguity as to various games that we have that are being utilized in stores around the state, coin-operated machines. In case y'all want to know, I actually grew up with these sort of machines. They helped get me through high school, college, and law school. And my father ran one of these machines, and what we want to simply try to do is clean up the industry and also provide some mechanism through H.R. 1116 for some additional money for trauma care. What it'll simply do, Mr. Chairman, is create two classes of these coin-operated machines. One will involve sort of the pinball situation. That's a Class A sort of machine in which there is no non-cash redemption offered. Then there will be a Class B category for these coin-operated machines that will allow for non-cash redemptions at the stores in which they are located. And then it will also, quite frankly, draw a bright line because there's been some ambiguity in various jurisdictions around the state regarding what is and is not permitted. Some areas have considered the non-cash redemption as a form of gambling, and there have been some prosecutions raised, and some other areas don't believe it's covered by the law and believe that it's legal. And what we're trying to do, Mr. Chairman, is draw a bright line between these non-cash redemptions and those type of machines that are operated illegally that would provide for cash redemptions, whether the owners of the stores are allowing for cash redemptions. And what we're seeking to do in the bill is toughen the penalties for folks who cross that line, while at the same time creating a new Class B for these non-cash redemptions that will require a $5,000 master license. There will also be a state license of $125 per machine that will be paid both by the owner and the retailer. And the reason the retailer is paying it, quite frankly, is that we want to make sure that the retailer has some skin in the game, for want of a better term, or something to lose should they cross the line and engage in illegal gambling. The money that we hope to raise through this, like I said, along with H.R. 1116, we believe could provide somewhere between $15 to $20 million. And we'll be happy to, at the appropriate time when we get to the subcommittee, we'll go into greater detail on the additional revenue we believe can be raised for trauma care throughout the state. That's essentially the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Lindsay. Any questions for the author of this legislation? I don't see any. We're going to assign that to our public finance subcommittee, and if you would contact Chairman Scott or Chairman Parsons, and they'll arrange a meeting for you at your earliest convenience.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for that riveting presentation.
I,
I'm not going to go on to dull the Judiciary Committee.
Chair recognizes Chairman Richard Royal. Tell us about House Bill 1211 and House Resolution 1276, if you would, Chairman Royal. 25.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but this deals with establishing a separate classification for forest land in the state of Georgia. It's pretty well based on the CUVA covenants that are already in force, but this will be a standalone constitutional amendment and enabling legislation. The major differences in this and the standard CUVA is we've increased the covenant to 15 years. We've increased the penalties 3 times the difference in the savings for the first 5 years, 2.5 times the savings for the second 5 years, and 2 times the savings for the final 5 years. We are making eligible all timberland. That forest land is defined in here. It has a definition in here. It allows any property owner who has a defined forest land to participate. They do have to sign a 15-year covenant. We've got a major problem in the state of Georgia. In the last 3 years, the people in the counties have learned how to count. Most of us learned how to do it the first year we were elected, but they've learned how to count. They have shifted the burden for property tax from the residential property owners to the large landowners. There's only a few large landowners in each county, and they shifted that burden. In the last 3 years, I've got numbers from the University of Georgia School of Forestry where they've gone up an average of 59% on the valuations and property tax. We're just going to allow those forest landowners to participate. The land will be valued at the CUVA tables established by the Department of Revenue. We've had extensive studies. We know the per county revenue loss, the total loss would be to county government, local governments, county and school, of $54 million. The bill calls for reimbursing those counties who have an impact of 4% or greater from the state treasury. That means it'll be a cost to the state treasury of some $20 million. I'll be glad. It's a very lengthy, very detailed piece of legislation. Most of it tracks the original CUVA covenant, the language in there, and the different amendments we've made over the years. But I'll be glad to try to address any particular concern.
I don't know of anybody in this entire legislature, for that matter, the state of Georgia, that's more of an expert in this area of the law than you, Mr. Chairman. So I look forward to your thorough explanation of this much-needed legislation. It's going to be assigned to our ad valorem tax subcommittee, which you are a co-chairman along with Chuck Sims. So I hope we will get these two matters quickly in the line of consideration here, because I do agree with you. We face a crisis situation in forestry in this state, and I'm afraid they're leaving quicker than we can hold them here.
Well, most of the large commercial forest landowners have already sold or are in the process of divesting themselves of the land. You know, most of the timberland in the state of Georgia is owned privately now, but there are a lot of tracts, and I've met with a lot of these individuals who own these large tracts. They're committed to remaining in the timber industry. They said, you know, we're third and fourth generation, so that's why we increase the covenant length. So we'll give them an opportunity, if they want to stay in the timberland, that they got to commit to the state that they'll stay in there 15 years. The penalties are harsh, but we don't want people speculating on this land and costing county governments money. I've been encouraged by both the executive department and the speaker to come with this legislation.
And I'm certainly glad you have, and we look forward to hearing a lot more about it. Thank you for that presentation.
And I'll bring a synopsis when we take it up in full, or when we take it up in subcommittee. Yeah.
All right, sir. We look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair recognizes Representative Quincy Murphy. Representative Murphy, tell us about House Bill 1173, if you would, please, sir.
Chairman and members of the committee, I come before you this afternoon asking for your approval of House Bill 1173. This bill began in probably March of 2007, when there were over 30 persons that died as a result of an act of violence at Virginia Tech University. After this tragic incident, there was a Hokie Spirit Memorial Fund that was established. In December of 2007, the U.S. Congress passed a statute that would exempt these families from taxation, federal taxes, on the funds received from the Hokie Spirit Memorial Fund. And the state of Virginia has recently passed the same exemption. There will be 2 families in the state of Georgia that will be affected at this time. I know there's been had an opportunity to talk to some persons that's on the committee, and they've expressed a concern about some of the language that's in the bill, beginning on line 11 and concluding on line 16. So based upon this committee having the expertise to right things that's wrong, so I would definitely be interested in your providing some guidance in trying to assist these families that are victims of this random act of violence. And Mr. Chairman, that's basically it. I will be willing to answer any questions if there are.
We certainly look forward to vetting out this legislation and certainly concur with you the horribleness of some of these acts that we hear about every day, and it does leave many aggrieved victims in our society. And I'm happy that you brought that. Any members of the committee have any questions for Representative Murphy? I don't see any now, but that's really not what we do at this first hearing anyway. You'll have plenty, I'm sure, in the subcommittee, and we're going to assign that to, since it has to do with income tax exemptions, we're going to assign that to our income tax subcommittee. And if you would contact either Chairman Jan Jones or Chairman David Knight, either of those 2 representatives can arrange a hearing for you at your convenience on your legislation. We look forward to seeing this move through the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
Chair recognizes Representative Alan Powell. If you don't mind, Representative Powell, will you tell us about House Bill 1203, please, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Bring to you House Bill 1203. It's a very simple, straightforward bill, a lot that y'all have seen about sales tax exemptions, and the language in this is crafted even though constitutionally we can't name a specific organization, but this would apply to the sales tax exemption for nonprofit organizations, 50C3, that basically build houses for people. Basically it's crafted for the Habitat for Humanity to exempt them from the materials from sales tax that they build and donate to these more underprivileged citizens of Georgia.
That's certainly a laudable initiative. Any member of the committee have any questions for Representative Powell? I don't see any. Thank you for that presentation, and we're going to assign that to our sales tax subcommittee. That'd be either Chairman Martin or Chairman Jeff Lewis, and I look forward to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Moving through the process. Thank you, Mr. Powell. Representative Calvin Hill. I'm sorry, I didn't see you behind the podium. Chair recognizes you to tell us about your House Bill 1180. Mr. Hill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Today I bring before you House Bill 1180, and this is really a minor bill to correct an oversight of my House Bill 380 last year, which simply protected taxpayers, property owners, from paying a penalty or an interest on their property tax bills if they had not received, in fact, the property tax bills. This really, in fact, impacted houses or real estate that was sold in the middle of a year, and many of the tax collection agencies did not send a tax bill to the new owners, and they were unaware of it. And we corrected it, but we did leave out one of the code sections, which is 48.5-24. That's an additional code section that just covers another 5% penalty. It was an oversight last year, and interestingly enough, it was the Gato's position to bring this to me. And I really appreciate the tax organization bringing this to my attention, that we overlooked this. They wanted to make sure we were consistent this year, and we'd look forward to being assigned to a subcommittee that would hear this.
Any questions for Chairman Hill by the members of the committee? I don't see any. We're going to be assigning that to our Public Finance Subcommittee, and that would be Chairs Austin Scott or Don Parsons. Either one of those gentlemen, I'm sure, would be happy to arrange hearings for you at your earliest convenience. Thank you for that presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Were you going to present something for somebody today?
If I could, sir, House Bill 1188 is a bill that was introduced by Representative Charlize Byrd, and I'm a co-sponsor of that legislation.
Yes. Well,
and she asked if I could present that.
Please, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. This is House Bill 1188 is a tax incentive bill that's designed to spur the expansion and development of the life sciences industry in Georgia. And it supports the development of the biomedical, medical device, and nanotechnology sectors, the biofuels and alternate energy sectors, and agriculture and forestry sectors, and even the biodefense sector. This is something that's really a follow-up to what has been going on here in the state of Georgia with all the new biotechnology, utilization of biofuels, and this kind of pulls all of that together, and it's pretty much a result of the study committee that was here this last year, the House Bioeconomic Development Study Committee, which was created last year by H.R. 662. And these are the tax incentives that came out as a recommendation as a result of that study committee. And Representative Byrd will be presenting this at a subcommittee, and at that time she will be able to present a little physical note to see how this would impact it. I do not have that today. She's awaiting that, but we'll be able to present that at the subcommittee meeting.
Okay. Any questions for Chairman Hill about House Bill 1188? I don't see any. I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about that, and I do remember several hours of involvement by other members in that bioscience study committee all summer long, so I expect some great things out of that legislation, and look forward to hearing the details of it. We're going to assign that, if you would let Representative Byrd know, to our income tax subcommittee, and she can contact Chairman Jan Jones or Chairman David Knight. Either of those elected folks will be glad to arrange a hearing at her earliest convenience, or yours as well. We thank you for that presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
If I could, I don't have a. Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Black, I'm sorry, sir. I did not see you in the back of the room there. You're usually pretty easy to pick out. I'm sorry. My apologies.
I do hope that was a compliment.
It was. It was. If you would tell us about your House Bill 1178, please, sir.
This is a renewal of a sales tax exemption that is scheduled to sunset. A bill that was passed by Representative Roberts here a couple of years ago that exempts the sales tax on LP gas that's used in swine production. If we don't enact this, we're going to be, in fact, bringing about a tax increase. There's not many swine production units left in the state of Georgia like what there used to be, but this is important to the ones that's there. It's also important to me because I actually visualize that the day may come where we see a revival of the swine industry in Georgia. It's been something that has been a real mortgage lifter for agriculture, and I think we need to keep this on the books.
I don't know that I would disagree with that, but what I'm confused. What's gas got to do with swine production?
It's utilized in the farrowing facilities, the farrowing houses, heat the fair houses.
Oh, I see. Okay, I'm sorry. I should have known. Any intelligent questions for the presenter by members of the committee? I certainly have not been able to come up to that standard, but anyone else?
The state physical note of this thing said it was a $140,000 cost last year.
Last year.
Right.
Representative Black, we thank you for that presentation, and we're going to assign that legislation to our sales tax subcommittee, and that would be Chairman Martin or Chairman Lewis. Either of those gentlemen can help you with that, arranging a hearing on that as quickly as possible. Thank you for that presentation. Chairman Stevens, you got a special presenter with you. Which one of the bills is that one about?
Bill 1196, sir.
I recognize you to tell us about 1196 and introduce anyone you'd like to speak to us about that bill, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, House Bill 1196, and I'll just do a short synopsis because I'd like to introduce the department head today. My commissioner is with me. It creates, for the creation of the GRA Venture Capital Fund, it provides urgently needed seed money for the early stage capital to move research from our Georgia universities to commercialization. It invests state funds with private investors on a 3-to-1 basis. It gives the opportunity for the state to take an equity position in the intellectual property of companies resulting in the 6 Georgia research institutions. It incents private venture capital through a 25% tax credit up to $30 million invested, and seed capital at 10% tax credit up to $75 million, alongside capital following formation of companies. The GRA Venture Fund will be administered by the professional venture investors. The state will have one board member seat, which will be our very own commissioner, and the remaining board seats will be investors of the private fund. And the fund is evergreen, which means that all the gains from the sales of the equity by the state are reinvested into the GRA fund to keep things moving. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce my commissioner, since this will be a department bill.
Well, I'd like to actually hear from him, if you don't mind, if he's come prepared to give us a short statement about this. I'm excited about this legislation. Let us know who you are, sir. And
I'm Ken Stewart, Commissioner of Economic Development for the state. And Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, members of the committee. I have both a long and a short statement, and I hear you calling for the short today. This is an exceptional opportunity for the state to get in the venture capital game. And it's an opportunity to leverage the existing statutory provisions under the ATDC for us to take an equity position in the investment that the state's already made in companies coming through our 6 research institutions. They create, of course, intellectual property that we've already invested in through the research institutions. Intellectual property comes out from which companies end up being incubated and created and then ultimately commercialized. A very small percentage of our venture capital in the state now is sourced in Georgia. We are actually well behind the game in Georgia, where only 11% of our total venture capital investment in the state is in-state sourced. The rest is coming from out of state. So what this provision really allows us to do is a couple of things in providing benefits. It allows the state to do like many other states and take an equity position in the companies created in our research institutions. It allows us to enter into private-public partnerships by incenting the private capital investment through the 25% investment tax credit. It also helps us grow the venture fund environment in the state of Georgia, which we desperately need to do, and it goes well beyond just these seed capital, early stage capital investments. And also, as importantly, it allows us to keep our startup companies here. We've lost so many of them because we'll get them started through the fine institutions that we have and the great intellectual property that comes out of those institutions, and then someone from someplace else that has the venture capital will come along and just pick up those companies and grow them somewhere else. So it's a great opportunity for us. Fiscal note's pretty simple on this. It has not been done yet, but it's just math. We expect it would take up to 10 years for $30 million of private capital to match the $10 million the state puts in to be called. And the alongside capital of $75 million, which is, again, private money, we expect it would take at least that 10 years for that to be called as well for investment. So the fiscal note on this would be $15 million, 25% of 30, and 10% of $75 million on the alongside capital, a total of $15 million over probably a 10 or 15 year period. So it's a great opportunity for us, lots more detail, and I'd be certainly glad to go into this in much detail, but I reserve that for subcommittee, sir.
We will certainly do that, and I understand this is a tried and true formula, and we're very, very excited about this innovative legislation, and I hope it moves very, very quickly through this process. We certainly thank you for that enlightening presentation. Any members of the committee have any questions for the commissioner while he's here? I'm sure there'll be plenty in subcommittee, and we look forward to that. And we're going to assign it to our income tax subcommittee. That's Chairman Jan Jones or Chairman David Knight, and we look forward to spirited debate on this much-needed legislation. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr.
Chairman. If you don't mind, I'm on because we got chairing another meeting here, and I frankly don't know how you can find time to be in 8 places at one time, but we're certainly privileged to have Chairman Mickey Chanel here with us, and he's trying to run his own committee and be in 3 others at the same time. Mr. Chairman, if you could come and tell us about House Bill 1210, and we'll get you back to work on your other duties.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I very much appreciate the consideration. House Bill 1210, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee, deals with 2 subject matters. It is one part of a larger bill, House Bill 1087, that is fairly comprehensive and is not in this committee. But be that as it may, it actually is an initiative of the governor, and so I suppose I'm a temporary floor leader for one bill, Mr. Chairman. But House Bill 1210 and what it deals with, the larger bill and this as well, is high deductible health plans. The notion, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, is to try to deal with the high number of uninsureds we have in the state, which is approximately 1.7 million people who do not have health insurance. Again, in Georgia, about 70% of the employers with fewer than 10 employees do not offer health insurance at all. And nearly 40% of employers with 24 or less do not offer health insurance. However, for many of these people, an individually owned health insurance policy is probably the best alternative, and that's what this gets at. Yet in Georgia, fewer than 5% of health policies sold are to individuals. And, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Lawyer Belafonte here has a physical note that we were attempting to get to you and the members of the committee prior to me standing here, but he just walked in and has them. The physical note is for the larger bill, but obviously the 2 parts of the proposed bill in front of you is included in there, and I will do my best to speak to those, Mr. Chairman. On page 1 of the bill, in section 1, what that does is offers a tax deduction for high deductible health plans to the individual. As you know, an employer, it is deductible to the employer, but we do not have it in code that an individual plan is deductible, and that's what section 1 does, Mr. Chairman.
I think I can save you some time. and that's certainly going to be fodder for our subcommittee.
Yes.
Our first reader process is basically just a summary
All right, sir.
and then assignment to sub, and we'll certainly be taking up those line-by-line issues,
All right, sir.
hopefully in the very near future on this very, very important legislation. So if you don't mind just doing a summary, that
I
might
will.
get you back to your
Yes,
committee
sir.
quicker.
The second part of the bill provides a $250 tax credit for a company for people who are for each employee that is enrolled for 12 consecutive months. That's what it does.
Great. Any questions from members of the committee of first signer on this very important legislation? For us to have consumer-driven health care initiatives that's incented, we've got a huge responsibility. And the time is now. It's not next year. It's not a year from now. We have a growing group of uninsured folks out there in Georgia, and I certainly compliment Chairman Schnell on this initiatives and others like it in the past to deal with what really has become a crisis in this state. And we look forward to dealing with this matter as quickly as possible. We do have one question, if you would yield.
Yes, sir.
Representative Flood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to just clarify the tax credit would be for the owner of the policy. Would there be a credit also available to the business owner if they provided the policy?
No, the tax credit is for the employer.
Okay.
Not the employer. The tax deduction is for the individual.
Thank you.
It's an interesting combination. Chairman Schnell, we're going to assign that to our income tax subcommittee, and Chairman Jan Jones or Chairman David Knight are the co-chairs of that, and I'm sure that they're going to be most anxious to arrange a hearing as soon as you can get it in your schedule, given all your other responsibilities over in appropriations. But we thank you for that presentation and look forward to that legislation moving quickly through this
Thank you,
process.
Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you for the consideration. I'll now go back to my public hearing upstairs.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, back to Chairman Stevens. You're recognized to tell us about House Bill 1195, if you would, Mr. Chairman. What, year 26 there?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, this follows right on the heels of Chairman Chanel. This is an attempt to lower the rolls of the uninsured in the state of Georgia, which are growing exponentially and, quite honestly, out of control. This particular bill is has a little more gusto, I might add, than most of the bills that we've had in the past. This gives a 50% tax credit for those people who are uninsured towards their income. It is not to exceed $2,000 in any year, and essentially this particular bill, 1195, is paired with House Bill 1197. If I may continue with that one, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 1195 essentially is a companion bill to 1197. If I can move to that one also.
You certainly may.
House Bill 1197 is the funding mechanism for how we fund House Bill 1195. By and large, this is a $1 per pack cigarette tax that should raise approximately $500 million, paired with the essentially $500 million in better health care and a lack of spending that the taxpayer would have to spend. We're looking at probably $1 billion that we can put towards the uninsured to fund House Bill 1195.
Well then, any questions for Chairman Stevens? All right, we're gonna assign 1195 to the Income Tax Subcommittee, Chairman Stevens, and we're going to do the 1197 in the tax reform. That would be Chairman Smokey Peak or James Mills, and income tax would be Chairman Jan Jones or David Knight. Is anyone in the audience here to present House Resolution 1273 for the Minority Leader, Representative Porter? Is there anybody here on behalf of President Pro Tem Eric Johnson? Speak up, Anybody here for Speaker Pro Tem Mark Burkhalter? Okay. Yes, are you here for that? Could you give us a brief 1 to 2 minute summary? That's the aquarium sales tax exemption. I think we've seen that before, so if it's very similar to last year's, tell us who you are and a little bit about that legislation, if you would.
Garrett Horlack with Alston Bird, registered on behalf of the Georgia Aquarium. And this is a exact rehash of House Bill 148 from last year that passed both chambers but got, how shall we say, piggybacked by another measure. And after passing, it got vetoed among those bills that had been packaged. So this is the second attempt. And what it does is allows a tax credit for the aquarium, for which, as most of you know, has been a real engine of tax generation for Georgia. And this would allow for the construction material for expansion to be given a tax credit on the sales tax.
Thank you. Any questions for the gentleman presenting? We don't have any. We will let Speaker Pro Tem Burkhalter know that this is assigned to our sales tax subcommittee, and certainly arrange hearings very quickly for him on this very important matter. And thank you very much for that fill-in. I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
May I be allowed to present House Bill 1273?
Yes, please.
House Resolution
please.
1273.
Yes, would you like to from your seat?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Resolution 1273 is frankly a bill that you, in some fashion, have heard before. It would allow for the utilization of 1 cent of the 4-cent motor fuel tax to be used specifically for transportation purposes. And those transportation purposes would be beyond just roads and bridges, but extend to rail, airport, buses, seaport, and public transportation.
Okay. And that would be a resolution?
Yes, sir.
To any questions for the presenter of that? If you would, let Leader Porter know that we're going to assign that, or we have assigned that to our sales tax subcommittee.
Thank you.
And hopefully we can get a hearing arranged very quickly for him on that. And thank you for presenting that. Also, I'm going to go ahead and assign Senate Resolution 686 to our Tax Reform Subcommittee. Ms. Napier or Kay, either one, if you would let President Pro Tem Johnson know that's in the Tax Reform, Chairman Peake or Chairman Mills. And speaking of Chairman Mills, if you would take the chair, and then I would like to tell the committee about 1168, if I might.
All right, am I on? All right, Mr. Chair, at this time we'll allow Chairman O'Neill to present his bill.
Thank you, Chairman Mills. 1168 is a hotel motel tax bill. That is an area of our code that is going to take some major comprehensive revision over the years. This is not that. This bill is brought by me only in my name because of a request from the city of Perry, which I very proudly represent down in Houston County. And it essentially changes allocations of their hotel motel tax, or at least their portion of it in the Convention and Visitors Bureau, to remove the requirement that they spend a certain percentage of that, of their particular allocation, in capitalized improvements. They can get better bang for their buck, so to speak, by spending that on tourism advertising. They're lucky to have the Agra Center there in Houston County, which is a great tourist attraction for Middle Georgia area. Now the Go Fish Georgia and some of those other attractions. they think they can use their funds in a much more efficient manner of advertising those possibilities to attract tourists. So that's what that legislation is all about. But I certainly encourage anyone else that wants to take on the reform of the entire hotel motel tax code. It is going to be a necessary, I don't want to say evil, but certainly a necessary initiative for us to look at to get some continuity and I guess predictability in that code. It has been sort of picked apart over the years, almost like this bill does, frankly. And these sort of initiatives can be risky, and I hope we'll deal with this and make sure there are no unintended consequences, since really ought to be local legislation, but we can't do it that way in this code. It has to be general. I hope the committee will help me make sure we do not adversarially affect any other situses that might be under the same allocation formulas that the city of Perry is. So that's what that's about. And Mr. Chairman, I would respectfully request you, if you would consider maybe assigning that to the Public Finance Subcommittee, but you can certainly assign it to anyone that you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your presentation. Representative Williams has a question.
Mr. Chairman, this is a statewide bill. Would it only apply to Houston County, or could Whitfield County, for example, come under this bill, or is it just specifically for that one county?
My understanding from Legislative Council is that it would apply to all of those areas that have otherwise elected under this particular section of the hotel motel law, and they call it paragraphs. Do you know more about that than I do, Representative Stevens? You may.
That's correct.
And so it may be that if Whitfield County had otherwise elected under this paragraph, which we're changing, am I on the right road here, Joe?
Yes, more or less. Most of the individual paragraphs, individual levies for hotel motel, are Gordian knot of restrictions and limitations, and assuming that Whitfield County met all of those requisite restrictions and limitations, then they could levy under that paragraph. But if they did, then they would also have to follow all the expenditure limitations. So most of the levies are limited to a city or a county.
But if you have a particular need, Chairman Williams, in that regard, I would encourage you to, as they say in the country, get after it in a hurry, because tomorrow is the 20th day, and if you need to get something dropped, you might want to do so in that same section if this bill doesn't help you. But I'm certainly amenable to looking at any amendments to this that might be beneficial to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not seeing any other. Oh, there is. Representative Stevens has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to reiterate, hotel motel tax reform, I think, is well on the way. So I think we're going to grandfather, hopefully, into things that we've passed before hotel motel tax reform comes into effect. So in just echoing your sentiments, if there's any need, they ought to be done now.
Thank you, Representative Stevens. If I could just actually, Mr. Chairman, I have dropped a bill along those lines, and we are in conversation right now with all parties involved, and hopefully we'll have some language soon to help clear up this code. It is very complex, over 20-something different exemptions, and even the cities and counties, while doing their very best, sometimes are not sure how the funds should be distributed. And so I can appreciate the opportunity that your local government has, and I'm going to do my best as a temporary chair to try to twist the arms of this committee to help you out.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also, on a very serious note, I have been advised that your bill may very well not only take care of my problem, but several others, and I certainly commend you on taking on that project, especially with all the other responsibilities that you have, because there is a lot of ambiguity in this particular area of the code, and I think we owe it to the people of Georgia to make their law much more predictable than this particular area is, and for that, this committee is great, and this whole General Assembly is grateful to you, Chairman Mills, for your initiative, and maybe I might be able to just let my bill die if your initiative, which is far more comprehensive than this, is successful, and I certainly hope it is. And thank you for pointing that out to us.
Thank you. At this time, seeing no further questions, I recommend we do commit to the subcommittee as prescribed by the chair.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else that has any business to bring before this committee? I want to say again. Well, I want to say a couple of things. I want to publicly say thank you to this lady sitting next to me, who might very well be the hardest working person in the entire Capitol. And that includes weekends, nights, early mornings, and a lot of times none of us even see. But Miss Lindsay Napier certainly distinguished herself as a vital asset to the process, and I want to publicly thank you for that. We simply know of none finer. And I also want to say to this committee, and especially the ones that are here today, Representative Teague, Flood, Mosby, Williams, Stevens, Rice, and Mills, you've certainly been the nucleus of a lot of hard work on this committee. This isn't sizzling stuff, but it's important stuff to Georgians, and I just really can't tell you all how much I'm inspired by your participation, your commitment, and your hard work for this committee, and I mean that to all of you from every perspective of policy that you might come from. It's all working. It's the way a citizen legislature ought to be, and I'm real proud to be associated with all of you. And I hope Georgia's as proud of you as I am, because you certainly deserve the respect and compliments from all that sent you here. I don't see any further business. We stand adjourned. Thank you.